I have a microphone in front of me.
I know. It's
been literally over a year.
It has been over a year. I liked that. So we should introduce ourselves, should we? Should we?
I mean, it's a brand new podcast.
Brand new podcast.
It is.
Yes. I mean, but it's an opportunity to do a bit of a rebrand, isn't it? Like, how are we like, hello and welcome to Off the Main Thread with me, Jake.
And me, Surma. And this podcast is sponsored by no one.
Well, I mean, Shopify are paying for it.
Well, I mean, it's sponsored by Shopify.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally sponsored by Shopify. As you know, like they are paying for the hosting and us to do this. I don't know what a better definition you want, mate. Like, yeah,
that's true. So what happened, Jake? Why? I mean, we never were good at regular podcasts in regular intervals, but a year and a half.
Yeah, well,
it's a bit
we used to do another podcast, didn't we? Called HTTP 203, and but you left Google, and I thought,
which didn't stop the podcast. There's exactly one episode.
Is there only one? Oh my god.
Yeah, there's one after I left Google, went to Shopify.
Excellent.
We did one episode and nothing
and
else.
I thought, well, that looks like a good idea. So I also left, and the problem is then it's like Google owned the name HTTP 203. Yeah. So we thought, well, we want to do a podcast, so we came up with a different name, and that name is Off the Main Thread. You see, it's a clever name because it's because of tech, right? You get off the main thread, it's threading, workers, all of that sort of stuff, but it also makes it sound a bit zany. We're off the main thread, mate.
And if we had a red thread that was supposed to run through our podcasts, we're usually quite good at abandoning that and being off
there are so many. Do you know what? We're really good at this.
Yeah. Already winning the podcast game.
Okay. Well, we're going to give this a go and see if we can rekindle some of the fun.
I mean, we had about 5 listeners. Maybe we can get half of them to follow us to the new podcast.
Yeah, maybe most people were just in it for the Google stuff. But now we're a little bit freer to talk. I mean, to be fair to Google, they had some problems with some things we said on the podcast. We won't go into
all the videos.
We won't go into too much detail about that. But yeah, it does sort of free us up to kind of be a little bit more independent on some of the browser stuff. I have had people on Twitter notice that they've said that I seem freer on the social media stuff, like because I'm criticizing Google products more. But the reason for that is actually a little bit different. Yes, I have sort of complained about some of the quality of Google products.
And to be fair, at Google, you were known to, be quite harsh but fair.
Right.
Even towards your own employees.
But I wasn't like that for some of the assistant stuff and some of the phone stuff because I was always testing newer versions. So complaining about it was totally pointless because my assumption was, when it was not working, it's like, well, this is just because this is the beta version or this is a new device or this is something. It turns out it's actually just, bad in general. I was so far out of the customer experience side of things. I just assumed that it was only bad for us testers, but now it's just sort of bad in general, isn't it? So.
I do feel though that on one hand, a bit of my empathy has gone because you when
towards me or like
like towards the engineers working on Google products because when I switched to a new phone, I remember at Google I was really frustrated that all my home screen installed PWAs were not migrated while all the other installed apps were, and that got me quite annoyed. And instead of yelling into the void on Twitter, X, or whatever you want to call it, I was able to file an internal bug directly onto the Android team or even walk over one desk to Peter Bevelou and tell him, do better. And, that's that opportunity, that privilege is gone now. So I only have Twitter left.
That's fair. Like, I got a Pixel Watch 2 because I bought the Pixel 8, the big one, whatever. And it came with the Pixel Watch 2. which I quite like because I had a Fitbit thing before it, which I did not like. But the new Pixel Watch is pretty good, except it cannot track a run, like, which is kind of the main thing it's supposed to
Isn't
do.
that like the gold standard feature of every wearable?
Yeah, and
That,
it seems to last about between 5 and 10 minutes on the GPS tracking, and then just gives up every time. Well,
I mean, it's hard work, Jake.
but I've done all the factory resetting thing, and the annoying thing is about being on the outside now is like I know how to take a bug report, but I can't submit one. I mean, that's one of the nice things about like Chromium being open source is like I can file, even on the outside I can file bugs against it, but you cannot do that
Doesn't
against the
mean
watch.
it'll get fixed.
It doesn't mean it will get fixed, but yeah. So I guess it depends what the bug is. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's not. But yeah, it's kind of frustrating. It's like, my watch is not working, and I can give you a thing that will help you find out why. But no, it's just that the advice has been to factory reset it, which has not worked.
It's really good because I know like a lot of stuff that Google does is really good, and I'm an avid user of many of their things. But I think since ever, something that frustrated me is the quote unquote help pages you find, where it's like I've run out of storage, and there's not a fix it button next to it. There's a learn more, and you go to these support.google.com page, which are just like accordions full of prose text explaining to you what you should consider doing. It's like just let me press a button.
Absolutely.
I don't want to triage this myself.
Oh, mate, I think this intro is really boring. We're just now chatting about Google.
Well, then you are at Shopify now. I switched Shopify. You joined me. Well, you joined Shopify, and coincidentally, I was there. Well, how is it? How are you finding it?
Do you know what? I am finding it. Well, I found it really hard until relatively recently, because I was 10 years in my previous job, and it was a DevRel job, and now I'm going into a completely different company, completely different role. Yeah, and I always felt imposter syndrome, as I think pretty much everyone does. But oh boy, like, and everyone was telling me, it's like, look, in a company like this, all the internal systems, you've got to learn them. You're going to feel useless for 6 months. But hearing that just didn't help. Like, I was still just like, I'm hating every day of just feeling useless,
Yeah.
And it was because I was still going to meet with the Vue Transitions team, because Shopify is interested in Vue Transitions, so I was meeting with them, and there was that sort of horrible feeling of like, oh, this is a little bit my comfort zone. Like, I know there's like, I was desperately trying not to fall into a trap of just doing my old job again,
Yeah.
But I am starting to find my feet with it now. I think working on some web component stuff, having fun.
So I was just going to ask, has the, maybe some people are wondering, has the web lost you, or are you staying true to your web?
Well, this is the thing. I'm working on web components things, and not because I'm working on some stuff where web components are the right thing to do. I'm not just like I'm steamrolling in and like, get away with your frameworks, we're going to do it the web way. It's just we're kind of developing some components that are going to be used with frameworks, multiple different frameworks, and without them. So web components are the right choice in this case. But no, I'm still doing web stuff, doing much less standard stuff, although I'm kind of keeping my foot in the door with Vue Transitions. But yeah, how long did it take you to feel useful at Shopify? Is that how am I doing?
I think you're doing really great.
Thanks, mate.
You've already found yourself a project to work on. You are doing like designs, and I don't know when I started being useful, which implies that I am useful now. Maybe I am. I just mostly, basically, what I try to, I guess similar to you, like lean into what I know, which was developer experience and figuring out what is intuitive for web developers, which, is clearly the target audience for Shopify, because you build web stuff. Like, as a developer building apps for Shopify, that's web development. Of course, on top of a platform that itself is on top of the web platform, but it's still web development. And so I went in and saying, like, this seems good, or this seems like not like web development, but we could make it look like web development, which makes it more intuitive. And like, that's kind of what I leaned in, I think, similarly, like for the first 6 months, and just like basically pointed at things and went, "This is stupid. Why?" And either I learned why it is the way it is, or I got to hear, yeah, that is a bit stupid. Maybe we can change it. And that's kind of the cycle I am still doing to this day.
Well, that focus on developer experience, I think, is key to it. So before I left Google, I was working kind of half on a team that was being run by Una Kravitz. So that was a kind of CSS team, and so I was kind of half in that team due to the Vue transition stuff. But the kind of story around the team that she built, I thought was really good, and it was like, we're in this for user experience, but the way we can make the user experience better is to make the developer experience better, right? And it's all, but you're not doing anything on the developer experience side unless there is a pretty strong, pretty clear line to the user experience being better at the end of it. So yeah. I think that's just a general rule, but it was nice having it spelled out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it's been really interesting for me to just see how much, I'm going to say how much in of a bubble I was. That was an English sentence.
I understood it.
Of a bubble.
Yeah, you.
Let me say that sentence again, good. Just so we have it incorrect. I kind of realized how much of a bubble I was in, which, we were kind of aware of because our whole job was to be at the bleeding edge of web and upcoming standards, like things that aren't even implemented yet. And then you look at a company who, is shipping a product to the web, or you're working for a company that's shipping a product to the web and can only use what's there and what is reliably there. And kind of, once it's working, there's really little incentive to like go back and update it to more modern APIs. And so I got into a code base in certain times where, there was a huge outdated approach to how JavaScript itself is written, and old tooling was being used. And it's just really interesting to see that that's probably quite representative. And is there enough benefit to investing to updating the stack?
So I actually,
and it turns out it is.
I have a question on that, which I probably probably should know the answer to, but I don't. What is the browser support we work on at Shopify?
I do not.
Oh, we just make it up. Good, excellent.
Yeah, I do think it differs a bit from, the core product, like a shop, to, for example, the admin interface.
Yes.
And I've been mostly working on the part of Shopify that is exposed to merchants, because that's where developers have to run their apps in, because merchants use the app to configure how the app behaves, while the app itself then mostly does a little bit of data manipulation on the database from Shopify or stuff like that. I guess if you work on themes, or like are actually on the product team and you work on the stuff that renders the stores.
Oh, you have a wider browser support matrix probably at that point.
I suspect so, but I think most of the time it's I would hope and I would assume that it's probably quite data driven. That it's just like, what are people using? So I'm guessing, is it like Safari 14 upwards, Safari 13 upwards? I'm not quite sure, but I doubt that we are one of the companies that has to support IE.
Oh, of course. Well, I'm staring at the Can I Use page for element internals. Have you used element internals before?
I don't think I've heard of it. Explain it to me, Jake. Finally,
yes, Tech Talk. Here we go. So it's not something I've used, but if the browser support fits, then I will. You've probably heard of it before. It's a way to attach metadata to an element that configures how it behaves in a form. So
it's the form stuff. I've never used it. I'm just aware that a custom element can signal that it participates in a form in a custom way, but I've never used it.
Well, it doesn't have to be a custom element, I believe. It's like shadow DOM, right? Any element can have a shadow DOM. Any element can have an element internals. So it is just your way of you typically use it with a custom
So wait,
element.
I can make a div append an element internal to it, put it in a form, and suddenly I have a new data field when I submit the
Exactly.
form.
Yes. So you get to
That sounds fun.
declare what the value of it is, what the validity of it is, all of that kind of stuff. So if you are making uh, your own range component that has two handles, or a date selector where you're selecting a range of dates or something like that, something that isn't already built into the browser, you can have it just, when the user hits submit, that you don't have to plumb that all in, other than just, on that one element basis of telling it what its
That's
value is.
that's kind of nice because I know that originally you would sometimes use input type hidden
Mm.
to like for like CSRF tokens or something, which is fine. But if your value is not a string or like something more complex, like you wanted to inject a pre-selected file,
Oh, that's interesting. Do you know what?
then you
I
would have.
don't know if it works with file data. Let's no. Oh, that's fun.
Are you going to live code it now?
Right. Do you know what?
Is
I am going to look this up. Right. MDN element internals. Right. Yes. Attach internals. Yep. That's how we do it. Right. Well, okay. Validity. Yes.
attaching your internal sounds a bit like something a medical student would do.
Well, it has more. It's got ARIA stuff in there as well. Like there's a lot more metadata you can set. But yes, one of the key things is the form value. Which let's have a look. There's a lot of set form value. Okay, here we go. Here's the interesting bit. A file or a string or a form data. Oh,
You can.
so
Ooh.
one
Oh,
field
that gets
couldn't
flattened.
be, I guess, in theory.
Well, I guess it is if it's submitted as whatever what is it, the XXX multi-part form MIME type, like they can be deeply nested,
I'm
right? Like
just
it's
surprised, like because my assumption was it would use its own name, like because
you're
you'll.
right, but like each field in a multi-part form can be in itself a multi-part form encoded
I
value.
suppose. I don't know if that's how it would work. Interesting.
I don't know
All right.
either.
Well, I'm not going to read the spec live on the show, but yes, I.
Ah, that's the new Jake.
That's right. I would have previously done this, wouldn't I? If state is a form, I am now reading the spec. If so, it's again, I'm saying one thing and just doing the opposite. Set the element state to a clone of the state's entry list. Yeah, okay, and the entry list is the yeah, okay, name and value pairs. So I wonder if it would normally fall back to whatever name the form is given. But otherwise, it might have its own kind of set of names. Well, that's good fun, isn't it? That's a lot of fun.
I mean, multi-part form is one of those things where we have it and we use it, but my God, what a weird format.
Oh,
with
yes, it's one of those historical mistakes, isn't it? Really, like
a little bit like these delimiters that are just like randomly generated strings to make you like, oh, it's very unlikely that will appear in your payload, but if it does, lol. I guess if you're the client, you can inspect and select something that is definitely not present. But man, you could have just told me the length of each section, then you wouldn't need a weird delimiter. But
so. Speaking of fancy new web features, though, well, I mean, we got sidetracked talking about a really old one there, but I was just noodling around with some CSS animation stuff the other day. I was at FFconf and I wanted to animate the logo. I don't know. I felt nerd sniped by a picture. So I just
we will link to the tweet in the description.
yes, we will. But I used CSS nesting without a build step.
Oh, look at you go.
I know.
Is that like where are we at in browser support?
Yeah, I knew you'd ask that question, so I have the link in front of me. So, it's actually a bit of an interesting story. So, it's sort of been there since Chrome 112. At time of recording, we're at 120 or 119. I think 120 is next.
So that's a bit of like half a year, almost a year.
Yeah. So Safari 16.5 and current version 17.1. But here's the deal. There was this, CSS nesting is something that everyone could safely say was a useful and good thing for about 15 years now, right? Like SCSS or SAS, whatever, came on the scene and showed that it was a good idea. And it's one of those things that has taken unbelievable amount of time to reach the browser.
The extensible web manifesto works. It just needs to be popular for 15 years or longer, and then it gets baked into the platform.
We might talk about the extensible web manifesto later on as well, but in this case, there was this kind of idea that everything in CSS must be like parsable character by character with no backtracking and reinterpreting. So there was this problem of, well, what if you've got a, you're in a div selector, and then you're going to nest a span selector. Now, when it parses S or span, like it does not know if it's parsing a selector or a property.
Okay.
Because a word can be a property name as kind of tag. Like they're just like so that's where it got into this place where it went round around the CSS working group forever, trying to think of some way of like how can this be overcome. So as soon as it sees that first character, it knows exactly what mode it's in.
Is that where the ampersand?
That is where the ampersand comes from. So yes, the kind of thing was like you use the ampersand to signal that
nested rule incoming,
which gets tricky if you don't want the ampersand to be at the start, because the ampersand is signaling like this. Well,
replace this with a parent. With the thing that's nested.
Yeah, it doesn't actually 100% work like that, but yes.
Okay. Well, how does it actually work? What?
Oh, now you're taxing me. So what it means?
Well, you can't drop something like that and then go, oh, it doesn't work like that, and then not explain it.
I know. So it's taking things that were matched by the previous selector.
As an element.
Yeah, so there's a way that with the way nested stuff is implemented is you can actually end up with parts of the first selector which aren't just at the start of the previous selector, but they could interleave. As long as it sort of matches from that point onwards. Oh, do you know what? I am going to link to a tweet that explains this, because I found it very surprising the way it works.
I'm now very intrigued.
Yeah, it's not just string interpolation. It behaves subtly differently from that.
Well, I'm glad they didn't go with string interpolation or that approach, because that's how CSS variables originally worked, and it just turned out to be a very short-lived fix for a bigger problem, right? Like that we turn out, we want to animate these values, and we kind of need to know what type they are and want to do more elaborate things where string interpolation just violently fails.
Yes. Yeah.
Like handling them as string replacement effectively. And so then it's later on, it was CSS properties and values spec, I think, that gave them typing, which made them animatable and all that stuff. Yeah. So I'm glad they basically didn't do the same mistake.
Well, and what we got with custom properties in CSS was so much better, because you can use the cascade. You can have all of your color properties at the root level and then override for dark mode or whatever.
Yeah.
Although the downside to it is you can't use them in media queries, because you start ending up in a media query doesn't have a parent selector, right? It's not, a media query isn't part of the cascade. So
I can't even use variables from root in a media query?
No, I believe there's a proposal to fix some of that.
Interesting.
You got to be careful of the infinite loop problem there as well.
Yeah, of course.
So it's
right, because in the media query, so if I say my breakpoint is at 7, I declare a variable to say my breakpoint is at 700 pixels, then write a media query where I say once my screen width is smaller than my breakpoint variable
changes,
then in there I could redefine the variable breakpoint to have a different value, and now we're in looping territory.
It's pretty much like the answer to every question where someone's saying, why can't we do this in CSS? The answer is the infinite loop problem, right? So yeah, that was the case there. But anyway, you had this whole ampersand thing, but then it was Emilio at Mozilla in one of the CSS meetings where this was going round and round of what's the correct syntax to deal with this. He just said, it's what if we can backtrack? And it was sort of this weird thing of like, everyone's like, well, that's the unbreakable rule we've set. You can't break that rule. And it was like, well, why not? And he went away and prototyped it, and he was like, it's fine, it's not slow, it's fine. And so when you go onto can I use for CSS nesting, there is the sort of yellow boxes, which is all of the browsers where the ampersand thing is needed, and then the ampersand thing was no longer needed. And yeah, at time of writing, it's only Firefox that has a stable version where the ampersand isn't needed, but it's coming in the next version of Safari and Chrome as well.
You got to give it to Firefox. They're usually quite quick on those things.
Emilio is one of those. When people talk about 10x developers, and I will kind of say like, yeah, I think the whole 10x developer thing is a myth, but then there is also Emilio, so like maybe not.
I'm glad to hear that to an extent, because one of the things I've been wanting to learn more about and have been starting to read up on is, programming language design, parsing, compilers, that kind of stuff, and have built minor toy stuff. And the kind of thing, basically this was saying like, oh, when we see the word span, we don't know, is this going to be a property or is it the start of a selector? With the goal being you want to have a single pass parser for the CSS. You can still have a single pass, and basically you start tracking or you start parsing in both states. What if it's a property? What if it's a selector? And if one of them fails, you just eject. And if you have to eject from all of them, then you actually have invalid syntax. I'm speaking as if I know how this is implemented in browsers and that it's all super easy. But I'm glad that basically there was someone who knows that he went, why can't we? And it doesn't sound like he definitely went down the route that I have in my head right now, but it feels like sometimes, if you spend too long on one project, like the folks in the CSS working group have spent many years on CSS, sometimes you don't necessarily consider breaking or considering to break old established rules. But I'm glad he did.
Yes, I think the places where it got really complicated is if you you could have span : before, which looks like a property name and a value, right? It isn't until you get to the curly brace that you're like, right, okay, this is actually a block. So the stuff previous must have been a selector. That is, yeah.
And like the CSS can I use thing shows, it, while, just because it is possible to implement, like it's possible to write a parser that can handle this, even still in a single pass, doesn't mean that it can be easily added to how engines currently work. Because, they probably have this assumption built in from the very start, and now you're breaking a fundamental assumption, which kind of makes the whole architecture potentially invalid. So I can see how it's not something you want to consider lightly after, I guess, almost 3 decades of CSS. But,
but yeah,
it's going to be better for it.
It feels like the future. I'm very excited. Yeah, it's finally here, and it works as people, mostly as people expect, apart from it's not quite string interpolation.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that sometimes tech is developed in the right way, because I recently probably had the worst tech day that I had in my life. And I don't know what went wrong on that day, but I feel like literally it must have been all the planets lined up and just aimed at my forehead to make this day as technologically awful as possible. So we're currently, I say currently, we've been doing this for years, but we're planning our wedding. And we have
just because there's been rumors in the past, we should probably clarify that this is the wedding between you and your partner.
You're already my you're already my podcast husband.
Yes, you're my podcast. We're podcast husbands together. But the wedding you're talking about is with someone else.
Someone else. Yeah, it's kind of an open podcast relationship. So, and we were having a meeting with the planners that we asked to help us in the morning, and literally 2 minutes before we were supposed to log on, the internet just went down. And that's, that's just unfortunate. And so was trying to figure out like what's going on, restart the router, and I logged into my profile with the provider, like, oh yeah, we're doing planned maintenance work. It will be like between 2 and 8 hours. And I was like, cool,
Oh,
could you have let me know
yeah.
beforehand? And of course the classic is that in this building you don't have mobile reception inside, so I literally ran a power cable into the garden where I put my phone, left the garden door open to tether so that we could have this meeting from the living room in our thick jackets because winter has come and it was very cold.
Yes.
But the door had to be open for the hotspot to basically reach inside, and we had glorious mobile delay, but we got the meeting done, and we were talking about all kinds of stuff, and amongst other things, the caterers for the food. And so the next step was basically to pay the deposit for the caterers to lock them down, which seems like a good thing to do.
Yep.
And went online, logged into my. So I should say this is all happening in Italy, so this is going to be an international bank transfer.
Oh, yeah. You're making it difficult for yourself because.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we've already
neither you or your other half are from Italy, so you're just doing that to make it complicated.
Yes. So I am not from England. My partner is not from Germany. So the only fair thing, so that every family gets treated equally, is to go somewhere completely different.
Yes,
and
of course.
We figured also the weather is more reliable in Italy,
and the food is more reliable as well. So
yeah. So on that note, I was trying to pay for them, and of course, despite having done other payments to Italian companies in the exact same way, the bank shut this transfer down. I say transfer, it shut my entire account
Wait,
down.
what?
Yes.
Okay.
Because that was apparently suspicious activity, and so I had to call
Hang on,
them.
what food were you ordering for the wedding? Was it cocaine? Is that?
Yeah, the Italian mobster cocaine buffet.
Yes.
And I phoned them and had probably the most condescending phone call I have ever had.
Okay.
So this person works in scam prevention, and I'm assuming they've seen some shit and probably have to deal with idiots throughout the day. But they were basically saying like, what kind of phone do you have? Do you have Skype installed? Yes, because that app can be used to remote control your phone. And I was like, yes, I know, but I didn't. And then they're like, did these companies, the caterers, ask you to lie to us? And like all these kind of like incredible questions that I had to like literally say specific sentences. You would just let me go, unlock my accounts, and let me go on with my life. I think it was 45 minutes of just being lectured on the risks of making international bank. I think the sentence I had to say, word for word, otherwise you wouldn't accept it because I tried. I understand that an international bank transfer is as good as giving cash money.
Do you know what? I went through the same thing recently because I'm, as part of leaving Google, I sold all of my Google shares. You don't have to do that, but I did. And that brought money from international sources into my account, which I then wanted to put into another savings account. And yes, I had exactly the same problem. I had to go into the bank and saying, they were like, and who is it you're transferring the money to? And I was like, I'm transferring it to Vanguard. And they're like, okay, and is Vanguard in the room with us now? I'm like, no, it's it's seriously. They're a savings company. It's fine. Like, is that okay? And did they tell you to call them Vanguard? Did they tell you to come here and say all of this? It's like, I get it, right? Because there are horrible scams out there that work on these patterns. So I get it.
Yes, I also get it, but just especially when she was trying to explain to me how phones work, it was just peak. To be fair though, my phone on that day was not behaving either, because as it turns out, I tapped into a great bug that apparently Google shipped for its new Android release, because I just wanted to quickly log into my medical insurance and see if some test result had come in, and I couldn't log in. it just said an L300 error.
Oh.
And so I had to call them. And I love calling support lines. It's a great use of everyone's time. Not that it's anyone's fault, but it's just never pleasant. And I spoke to a very nice person who helped me, and she was like, "Oh, L300. Yes, we know this error. That means you have an empty workbench." It's just like,
what, in my house? What? How do you know?
Apparently,
the camera's on.
Become an empty workbench. And I was like, she doesn't need to call me out like I don't work out enough. I mean, come on. And she was like, "Yeah, I can file a ticket for you right now. The tech team will get on it, but it can take up to 2 weeks. The only thing I need from you is a screenshot so that tech team can see which error it is." And I was like, "I can tell you the error is L300. He's like, "Yeah, but they like it. They get mad when I don't provide a screenshot."
Fair enough.
All right.
Yeah.
And I was trying to take a screenshot, and my phone said, "You have run out of storage, mate." Excuse me. And luckily this time it was like free up storage button, and I pressed the free up storage button, and it says I had 65 gigabytes available.
Yeah, so screenshots have gotten a lot bigger in Android last time.
It's true. I mean, there are uncompressed PNGs. So, and I did a reboot. I did multiple things. I could not take any screenshots anywhere. And actually, it turned out many of my apps had stopped working and saying, "Your storage isn't there." I couldn't install apps. I couldn't uninstall apps. And I was like, this is weird. And so I started Googling. And it turns out that with I think it was the Android 14 release, if you had a second profile, which I did for work, there's a chance that you're triggering a bug which just makes your entire storage inaccessible with no fix and no reaction from Google after 2 weeks. And I guess maybe not many people have 2 profiles. Maybe it is not overall a high priority. But man, having to literally in the end.
Yeah. So what did you do? Has it been fixed? Is it?
I nuked my second profile in the hope it would fix it. So basically, I just threw all of work off my phone, which is annoying because setting that up is tedious with all the single sign-on stuff and blah. But I kind of wanted to be able to use my phone. Didn't fix it, so I literally did a factory reset. I had to go full wipe and have not set up a work profile so far because I'm worried it will just
give you the bug
go
back.
Downhill again.
This has become a real trashing Google podcast now, hasn't it? This is the change.
I know. I'm really sorry, but also it was just the cherry on top for my tech day, because this was all one day, right? This was all happening on a single day, and that on Friday I was like, I'm just going to turn everything off and I'm going to do analog evenings.
I know those days where you feel like you try and work around one problem and you find 3 more, and it's just like, no, yeah, life is not giving you a break. And I think you just go back to bed in that case. I think that's all you can do.
Yeah, that's what I should have done. Actually, I could use a bit more sleep sometimes. So should we talk some more about the web?
Yeah. Is there something in particular you want to talk about? I've got stuff, but
I've just been ranting. What do you have?
Well, I thought we could talk about why stuff gets added to the platform and what the system is. Why certain features get standardized and others do not, and what are the rules and reasons.
I could do so many snarky remarks right now, but I feel like that's not the direction we want to go.
Well, I imagine everyone listening is the same, because everyone will have their pet feature that has received not enough attention. So there isn't a hard set of rules, and there are definitely features that I like that either never got attention or it took a long time. But I thought I thought I'd break down some of the reasons that we actually see stuff landing on the web platform, or kind of what the easy sells are. So one of the easiest things, if you've got a feature in mind and you want it standardized, you are going to have the easiest time if it already exists in the browser, but just not exposed.
Oh, I thought you meant if you want to be able to change the color of a text, lucky day for you. You can already do that. No,
that's right. That's even easier. Yeah, if it's already there, you don't even have to file a bug. It just works.
Yeah, but you're right. That is a very easy way to add something to the platform, and that is the only thing I've ever done.
Well,
I have The one thing I added to the platform was structured clone, and because it was easy, because it was already there, the only thing I did is gave it a function name.
And that was perfect, because you had this situation. So for people who don't know, structured clone is a way of taking a deeply nested object array.
Deep cloning values, because
Yeah.
everybody used underscore or something similar for it, because there was nothing built in apart from JSON stringify and then JSON parse, which, to be fair, really fast, because that's why people used it. And so browsers spend time optimizing the specific chain of functions to be extra fast.
Yes.
But, JSON can only represent so much. You don't get maps, you can't handle cyclic data structures, functions just get lost, that kind of
Exactly. So, but that idea of cloning an object already existed for post message. If you send some stuff to a worker or from a worker, between workers, whatever, this algorithm already existed. The means already existed for internally turning one of these object things into some serializable format, and then turning it from that serialized format back into the object. The serialized format itself is not spec'd. So it's not like a new JSON. You never get to see the serialized format, but you do get the fresh object at the other side. And and you walked in and said, let's just have a function that does that, so we can do it synchronously. And well done, mate. You got your feature. But this has happened with loads of stuff. Like, query selector is one of the old ones, right? We had libraries like jQuery, like designing entire engines to kind of find elements by a query selector.
Did they originally implement it from scratch?
Yes. Yeah. So they were parsing these CSS strings and then creating a valing it into some sort of, different libraries did it in different ways, because it wasn't just jQuery, but some would essentially like parse the selector into a function that they can a string function that can get evaled, and then that was the method of going and finding the elements. But it was stupid, because this code already existed in the browser, because that's how CSS worked.
Indeed.
So so that's one of the it took a long time, and it has a stupid name. It should just be match. Anyway.
You know what? I never thought about it. It is a weird name.
It was from the era, I think, where everything had to be very specifically named. So, but I think
you query a selector.
Well, people back in the day would say like, "Wow, but there's other ways of matching elements like XPath," and it's like, no one cares, mate. Just call it match. We can.
The weirder one, to be honest, is query selector all.
Yes, and that started a trend where you have two APIs, one that gets one thing, one that gets multiple, where the second one has the suffix all. And so like the cache API has that same thing as well, and probably more. But that's at least it's following a convention, even if it might not be a great convention. But one that I spotted recently is, because I would like it for web components, is to know what language to render the text in. Which is kind of like essentially give me, the parent element with a valid lang attribute, or fall back to the OS set language, and then let me know when that changes.
Document.language.
Yes, and that will give you the OS one. And there's also a language change event for when that changes. But what it doesn't tell you is like what's the language of this part of the DOM tree.
Right, because technically you can have subtrees with different lang attributes.
Exactly. And there is a very old CSS selector pseudo class for matching the language of that element. So again, that code is there. It just needs to be exposed, and then needs an event added to it or something, but whatever. That's not the only reason things get added, although it is one of the easiest ways. Another reason is to expose operating system features, and this is the things like this gets really controversial because it's things like the Bluetooth API, which we haven't seen outside of Chrome, but then less controversial things like cameras.
Also a greatly named API with get user media.
I do find that the media APIs you can tell they're designed by a completely different set of people. to the rest of the
Yes.
platform. You kind of see that with WebRTC as well. It's the people who
One of the videos that wasn't very well received by Google engineers.
Internally, yes. Yes, that got us in trouble. Yeah. Anyway, but that is another reason.
I mean, the whole exposing stuff that's already in the operating system is kind of the tagline that Project Fugu had at the time.
Oh, right? Exactly. Yeah, notifications,
like
push.
Every native app can do a thing with the operating system. Why can't a web app do the thing?
Yeah, and this is where you start seeing a rift between how Chrome wants to do things and how Safari wants to do things. Safari's view is that the web tends to lean more towards that the web shouldn't have these features because these features can be a lack of privacy vector, like a fingerprinting vector, or why should a web page be able to see your face, and that a permission dialog is not good enough as a way of controlling that, or you can get camera access in Safari, but there's those kind of this is the thinking behind like Bluetooth, USB, that kind of thing. Whereas Chrome's attitude is the web should be powerful, and look, if we're pushing people away from the web onto native, then that's worse for privacy, even more so.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that's the two philosophies, I guess. So then we start to get into the features. Well, there's some features that can just be polyfilled that get added. Things like array.at, and map and set. You can write good polyfills for these, but that they are added just on it makes it nicer. It makes the language nicer, and that's the reason.
Which I feel like TC39 has been paying more attention to that kind of stuff, making JavaScript just have a couple more batteries included, which honestly, I'm here for it.
Yes.
I've been really enjoying seeing JavaScript evolve into a language where just some more stuff is there out of the box. Like an at is one of those things which I still often have to check, can I actually use it? But I can, and it's so good to finally just be able to say at -1.
And that's the only thing I use it for, right?
Element.
Is -1, right? Is negative indices, but great, fine, whatever, it's there. And I want things like, I want the iterator helpers to arrive for similar reasons.
Yes. And one of the things that I wish, I was just talking to Shu recently about it, who is the chair for TC39, that one of the things I wish had succeeded, and we talked about it at the time, is the bind operator. Because the thing that is really hard right now, or just shouldn't be done, is adding a method to existing types. So if .at on arrays wasn't a thing, you could possibly go to array.prototype and define a new at function. But that's how we ended up with
Smooshy, Squoosh, Gate, yeah.
Yes. And so generally adding stuff to a prototype that you don't own is considered bad practice.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so what do? Do you create your own array type? Like, do you literally extend, like create a subclass of array with some extra methods, which, that's technically fine. But then when someone in a library returns a new array, you have to then point the prototype to a different prototype so that your functions are available, which seems annoying.
Yeah.
Or you just do a top-level function where the first parameter is the array and the second parameter is the other parameters, which that's fine, but it just doesn't seem right. And at the time, there was this pitch of bind operator versus pipeline operator. And to this day, I feel like the bind operator would have been better bang for the buck, because then you could just define these top-level functions, and instead of doing some array .at, you would do some array : at. And this way JavaScript would know this is just a normal function. I'm going to call this function with this having the value of the left side of the : and the parameters are the parameters. And so this way you can basically augment any type with new methods without having to muck with the prototype or create subclasses or anything like that. And that just seems great to me. And also the other part about classes is, which I've just remembered, if you create a subclass, you kind of throw tree shaking out the window.
Exactly. Yes, that is one of the things I liked about the possibility for the bind operator is that you could ship a class where only the methods that get used remain in the bundle at the end. Although I do wonder is that could we with TypeScript could you get to a state where we can
True.
tree shake classes anyway? But I mean it's
It's
not
interesting
easy.
because I feel like with TypeScript we've kind of opened up a new paradigm where we can do things like apply optimizations in scenarios where we can prove that they're safe.
Mm,
Because previously it was we can only do things that are always safe to do.
yes.
And removing a method from a class is not safe because there's no way to prove that this method doesn't actually get called. But with TypeScript, we can say if your typings are consistent and you're not like opting out with any or something anywhere,
Yeah.
we can basically say we can reliably prove that this method doesn't get called. And we can also say there is a code path where typing has been disabled or where weird runtime shenanigans are happening. We cannot with full certainty say which methods are called. And then certain optimizations can kick in or not kick in.
It would be a risky
It's really
optimization, but
interesting.
it feels like something that it would be nice to be able to opt into and in a fairly
Yeah.
closed system. Um, there is also a group of features that are very polyfillable, but get standardized for different reasons. I'm thinking about things like promises, URL pattern, and abort signal. Now, these are all things that you can very, very easily like create polyfills for. We've seen polyfills for promises, URL pattern, all of these things. But the reason they got standardized, I mean, partially because they're useful in of themselves, but by being standardized, it means that other standard things can return them and receive them.
Yes, exactly. And also to an extent, it can move the ecosystem forwards to a spot where libraries become more composable because they can share these fundamental data structures and patterns to, pass it. You don't need to have stuff in the middle to convert from one library's representation of a promise to another library's representation of a
Exactly.
promise.
And you would never be able to have your media APIs or whatever return a promise unless the promise is that promise feature is defined. We would never have had async functions unless promises were defined. And we're seeing the same with URL pattern. If folks haven't seen URL pattern, it's a way of writing patterns that look are very, very similar to the kind of routes you would see in Express.js. And it parses those, and you can query URLs against it, and it'll give you the subpaths and all of that sort of stuff. You can just create an object and execute it like you would a regex. But the other good thing about that being defined is you can now have sort of internal systems that deal with it. I know we're looking at it for they're looking at it for service workers for declarative routes based on URL patterns.
Ooh.
And also it's being looked at in view transitions for cross-document transitions, MPA transitions, like where you could say URLs that look like this should have transitions between them. So that's URL pattern.
I've been playing around with building like a really bad and half-assed remix clone that doesn't have a server head, it's completely statically rendered. And I used that to build a router, and it's just so nice to have that in there out of the box and do the matching and get you even, in case people don't know, it's the kind of thing where not only does it do route matching, but you can, similar to how I think Express does it, and many other libraries, you can use variables in a path and it will extract those values. So if I have, /users/:name, which means any path that starts with /users and then any username, I can afterwards query what value is name on this specific URL, which just makes those kind of things so much easier and more expressive to write.
Absolutely. And it is, I should say, it's Chromium only in its support right now. But I think what it will take is for one of these other higher level features to require URL patterns, and that will cause support to be added in Safari and Firefox. So if view transitions use them, service worker static routes use them, then I think that's when that will encourage.
And that's a really good small polyfill as well, in case you want to start using it now.
Exactly. exactly. And then I think the final kind of feature we see is like new capabilities that you can't possibly polyfill yourself, or not in a useful way. And that's when we're talking about things like service worker, uh, talking about things like
Yeah.
view transitions. Like these are not operating system concepts, but it is just letting you like do things you couldn't possibly do without it. Um, yeah, but then you also get into things like uh, scroll snap points. Like it's just you couldn't tap into the platform physics.
You you can implement something that visually behaves like that,
Yes.
but it has a lot of drawbacks, right? Like either avoiding you're preventing animations from running on the compositor thread, which is better for performance and also battery life. It will just often on lower end devices not feel as responsive and might actually not feel, because scrolling is often different from operating system to operating system. Unless you spend the time and implement each operating system scrolling animation perfectly and correctly, it will just be in this uncanny valley of this doesn't feel quite right. We all have been like seen a carousel where you do the scroll gesture, but it doesn't actually stick to your finger. Just once the gesture is done, it scrolls to the next image.
Yes.
And I hate
And
that. It feels so
that
wrong.
is a whole kind of a lot.
Hang on, Jake. You just went full Bluetooth microphone on me. I think.
Yeah, I heard a slight pop. Can you hear me now?
As long as the recording is fine, but it's just like I literally mostly hear white noise right now and a bit of voice in the background.
Oh, because there was a pop, and then okay. Let me. I can rejoin the call. 1 second. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. So
I think it switched to for some reason it switched to using the. I've got some earphones in, some wired earphones, and they have a microphone on them, but that's kind of that's behind my neck. So I think it switched microphones for no good reason. But it
interesting. While we're pausing, I might quickly run for a bathroom break.
Go for it. Oh, maybe I should feed my cat at the same time. Hello, Kimmy. No, not even going to look at me? Little shit.
All right.
All right.
Back. Do I sound acceptable?
Yep, you do. Yep.
Right. I'm gonna take a teaser image for the Twitters.
Oh, I could do the same, I suppose.
All right. Actually, that's a good idea. Go full. Did they switch on the Pixel the preview button and the switch to other camera button?
Because yes, they did. Yeah, they did.
Why?
I know. Well, yeah. I think the worst thing that Chrome's doing. Have you noticed this thing that Chrome's doing right now, where sometimes when you open a new tab, there's a little dialogue that tells you can change the theme, but that means that the URL bar doesn't get focus. It's like,
Yes.
who signed that off? What? Like, we're being conditioned for a decade now that opening a new tab, you have the URL bar highlighted. Like, I can only assume that was a mistake because that is crazy otherwise. I'm
Yeah.
going to feed this
It's
cat
also like,
back in a second.
yeah, go for it.
You're interested in feeding now, are you, Kim? You've waited the whole time. And Surma was in the bathroom. Come on. Oh, you want out? Or do you want out? Okay, maybe you want out instead. No? You want biscuits? Diet. Can you make a mind up? Jesus. There you go. Biscuit time.
Biscuit
Another
time.
cat has arrived who also wants biscuits. Okay.
Oh, and once the biscuit
There you
sounds
go.
comes. This is gonna be the weirdest B-roll.
Very awkward position.
Biscuit
Right.
time!
I'm back. Hello.
Oh, you didn't even hear me. For some reason, I thought you could.
No, sorry.
I was just saying this is gonna be the weirdest B-roll because you were just saying biscuit time. I was like, biscuit time! Biscuit time!
Brilliant. Well, that can be after the outro. All right, I can vaguely remember where we were at.
Alright.
So you're covering there like another subset of features where it's things that you can do but do it badly. So, and that is like,
Or not do it all.
well, no,
right?
but I think the
Sometimes-
subset is ones that you can do but do badly, and so browsers give you a way of doing
Right.
it well. So things like
Okay, yeah,
scroll
sure.
linked animations, things like I guess animation off the on the compositor thread in general, right?
Yeah.
And it's so there's lots of different reasons that you can add something to the platform, and I think this sort of shows a real difference between Chrome and Safari of like which section of those to spend time on and effort on. Do
Yeah.
you remember the Extensible Web Manifesto?
Considering, Jake, that I referenced it earlier. Yes.
Well, who knows if that's going to make the edit? So-
Ah, that's true. Considering that this
Yes,
might
it
not be the
will.
episode. No, Jake, explain it to me. What is it?
well, I was gonna get you to explain it. You wanna take it?
Right. I think it's still online.
It
isn't
is. We'll
Isn't
link to it.
Extensiblewebmanifesto.org or
Something
something.
like that.
We'll link to it. I think the TLDR is that for the web platform, the things that should get prioritized to be added to the platform are low-level features that make it more extensible, that, add capabilities that weren't there before, and then let an ecosystem of libraries emerge on top of these low-level capabilities that tie them together into high-level capabilities that developers want to use to build things. And if and only if any of these high-level patterns become and stay relevant for a significant amount of time, should the web platform consider to add this high-level feature to the platform itself.
Yeah,
Would you agree with this?
absolutely. Yeah. So it means things like we shouldn't be adding a special CSS feature that adds a reflection onto elements, which is a WebKit one that we have. We shouldn't be doing that. Instead, we should be having a Paint API where you can do that and more.
Yes.
Although I don't know if with the Paint API, I don't know if you can actually paint outside the bounds of the element. So I don't know. Maybe that particular use case hasn't actually been done yet. And also, I guess because of reflection, you need to be able to get the painting of the element. Anyway, the idea is supposed to be that you would be able to have some kind of way to do a reflection, but therefore lots of other stuff like that as well. And as you say, things that become common but take a lot of code in these low-level features should have high-level features made around them.
Which is also the reason why, originally jQuery itself wasn't added to the browser. But rather some low-level primitives that can be composed to build something like jQuery were added.
Yeah.
And it's also the argument that was used when people were, requesting /demanding /shouting that we should just add React to the browser, or that, the VDOM should be added to the browser. Some of these things actually have caused new primitives to be added to the platform, like the template tag,
Hmm.
but not the entire library as is itself.
Yeah, it's an awkward one, that stuff, because I don't think any of that has been particularly useful to React in the same way like
No,
query
that's
selector
true.
was very useful to jQuery. But yes, you're right, and I think this. I think the Extensible Web Manifesto has largely been forgotten. A lot of people do not like it, and I think that's because, well, I think Chrome focused too much on the low level stuff and never really did any of the high level stuff, and that's why it took view transitions so long to appear on the scene, because it was kind of like, well, can we dig further down and make something that lets you do a view transition, but also lets you do other similar things that are kind of like view transitions, but they never really discovered what those things were. But also, like, yeah, scroll snap points arrived late. I mean, there was a lot of pushback in
Yeah.
Chrome, but you could say, well, maybe for good reason, because on Squoosh, like when in the pinch zoom element, I can't code that in a way that has platform physics. Because the only platform physics we have is like scroll snap points, which doesn't make sense for pinch zooming,
Yeah.
So yeah. Whereas Safari were never seemed really into the Extensible Web Manifesto, because it was like low level things let people do stuff we might not want them to do, and developers will do it in a slow way because developers are rubbish.
Exactly. And I think it's like you said, this is a very fundamentally different philosophy. The Safari folks have always been, more favoring declarative approaches, because that way you can pre-analyze what is going to happen and can optimizing steps for developers. And the low-level primitive approach is a bit like letting you run with scissors. And I'm personally of the opinion, like, let developers run with scissors. Like, give them raw capability and power, because you can always build bad stuff.
Well, that's the thing.
I
Is it worse than a while true? Like, you can do while true. It's like it's only a few characters. So it gets to the point of like, where is it relative to a while true? If developers want to do
Yeah,
it wrong on purpose or even kind of by accident, it's going to happen. Does it make it the result of it worse? Is it literally, are you going to be able to break the whole operating system with it? In which case, right, it's worse than a while true. Or is it really easy to do it wrong without realizing, and then you're going to end up with a whole web that is slow? So I have some sympathies for that thinking, but largely, I completely agree
think
with you.
there's a difference between, the pit of success, where you go on your journey and you just end up with something that is good and great and successful, and barbed wire guardrails where you have one path, and if you want to do if you want to go anywhere different than what this path prescribes, you end up in barbed wire and don't succeed effectively.
Yes.
And I think there is a healthy middle ground where you can have, like, you can set developers up for success. You can make the right thing easy and obvious without having to take away the possibility of doing it differently.
Yes. Yes. And I do think that we are in this post Extensible Web Manifesto time now, where like we are seeing so much stuff, so much investment from both Safari and Chrome and Firefox into CSS features. And this is where we're getting like, scoped CSS, we're getting nesting, we're getting view transitions. Like these are all CSS features, like the new color spaces, all of that kind of stuff. But I do think, like, that we are missing some of those lower level pieces. Like, give me platform physics, give me access to that, so I can build my own components with that kind of thing. But I think that is just what's going to happen on the web from now till the end of time. Is like investment is just going to oscillate between high level declarative stuff and low level components. But maybe that's fine on average.
You could argue that having, two players that are somewhat at the opposite end of the spectrum and pulling into different directions will keep the platform as a whole more in equilibrium, which could be a good thing.
But I think
Might
Chrome
argue
is
that
much closer to the Safari. I don't think we have much fighting for the low level stuff. We've got Fugu, which are doing the platform capabilities stuff, but I think some of the lower level stuff, like that stuff with the Paint API I mentioned, like, you know, why can't we have like a way to build our like a reflection? I want to get back to, you know, like those Java applets where you've got that rippling effect. Like why can't we do that? You know, what's missing? Oh, I moved my chair when I said that, so I'll give you that last line again. Yeah, but I want those things like those Java applets, you know, the ripply stuff. Like, yeah, I want to get to a position where we can have that, but it seems so far off.
Yeah. I'm looking at my GarageBand,
Yeah,
and we just surpassed 2,222 bars.
yeah, or 1 hour 10 minutes. Yeah. So that's been a lot of. So do we have a? How do we sign these off? Do we have a new catchphrase? Do we just continue the old one? Was that?
I mean, the last one was invented by
Mariko. Yeah.
And I feel like we should ask her to come up with a new one.
Or we could just do the Irish exit, where it just. So are you familiar with that term, the Irish exit?
I think I was in fact introduced to the Irish exit by Paul Irish.
Well, me too. And herein lies the problem. Because, so for people who don't know, Irish exit is when you just disappear from a party. It's a very useful tool because, you know, it means no one's going to pester you for one more drink. You could just kind of disappear, and that's fine. Yes, and someone who is very good at doing this is Paul Irish. And I mean,
it's in the name.
Right. Well, that's the thing. So I remember saying, "Oh, where's Paul Irish gone?" And he's done the Irish exit. I was like, "What's that?" And he's, you know, just walks out, and, you know, he's done with the evening. I'm like, and I didn't realize at that point that Irish exit was a general term. I thought it was being the Paul Irish exit. I thought that the Irish exit means the Paul Irish exit. And every time I heard that term from then on, it was said by someone who has a close connection to, or, you know, a close enough connection to Paul Irish. So for years, that phrase just lived in my head incorrectly until someone with no connection to Paul Irish, to my knowledge, well, said it. They went, "Oh, you know, I think I might just do an Irish exit." And I was like, "You know Paul Irish?" And they were like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "I don't know." And that's when I started to realize, oh no, wait. Oh no, how long have I been getting this wrong for? Yeah, okay. That's.
So should we just do that then? Do we do Paul, the Irish exit?
Would that be it?
Perfect. It's perfect. I love that.